May and Laren brought Zeos' unconscious body to Gar's room. Gar awoke from the edge of sleep to open the door, and the group checked Zeos for signs of what may have caused him to fall unconscious. Gar was able to identify that it didn't seem to occur from any physical trauma, but was almost reminiscent of a drunken sailor passed out due to causes beyond their control. Gar attempted to give Zeos a bit of water, just in case he was extremely dehydrated by some chance, but to no avail. Over the course of conversation, Gar glanced back and was certain that Zeos had stopped breathing, and so did the logical thing. Told someone to give him mouth-to-mouth while Gar proceeded to give chest compressions for the clearly dying Zeos, and though unnecessary, once Gar saw that Zeos was breathing normally, he ceased chest compressions. Gar assessed that Zeos appeared to simply be sleeping, and did not appear to be in any dire danger, and very well may wake up the next morning, but May remembered hearing that elves usually trance instead of sleeping, and cannot be put to sleep magically, and so the group decided to take Zeos to a local temple in Harmony for assistance from a cleric. Laren went to get Mavis before the group left, and as the group left the tavern, not taking time to re-equip any gear before leaving, the music stopped as all eyes in the tavern witnessed quite the event. A female cleric in a simple tunic with a shirtless, scaly-skinned elf over her shoulder, followed by a shirtless dragonborn in simple pants, a gnome with a sack slung over his shoulder, and a half-elf, being the only one that looked relatively normal. Onlookers probably thought this poor elf was about to undergo a hazing, as the party was quite the sight to behold at this moment, but duty called. As the party traveled under the moonlight through the bright cobblestone streets of Harmony, eventually Mavis asked what had happened, and if anyone had tried any basic form of healing, and the group rested under one of the lampposts along the streets, heeding Mavis's suggestion. The light from the lamppost itself emanated a constant hum that harmonized in tone with the next one on the sidewalk. Mavis attempted to gently bow to an elderly couple that passed by, but the weight of his items in his new bag that was not a bag of holding put him off balance, and he face-planted onto the stone, causing the couple to quicken their pace and walk away, an outcome that Mavis was happy with. Gar casted Healing Word on Zeos, and as the magic finished sinking into Zeos' body, he gently opened his eyes to see his group, disheveled as they may have looked at this moment, staring back at him. Zeos tried to recall what happened, but was unable to remember anything after casting the Comprehend Languages spell, as Zeos noted the pounding pain in his chest from Gar's chest compressions and a splitting headache from whatever happened to him. After making sure that Zeos was okay, the group returned to the Rumor's Reach to sleep for the night. The group awoke the next morning and discussed the document from the night previous. Zeos contemplated if the fact that the document was connected to Ilmater was part of the reason that he was able to be put to sleep. Mavis grew curious about this document and asked to see it himself, and though May was a bit apprehensive and made absolutely certain to maintain its safety, she gently retrieved the document to show the group again. Mavis was able to identify a portion of the document written in Gnomish that read, "In times of turmoil, the darkness may even illuminate the light." This line confused the group a bit, but they figured that it must deal with the balance of darkness and light, that the two define each other in a way. The party did note a section of the text that seemed to be partially written in Celestial, but impossible to read without knowing the other language interspersed within it, like jumbling a sentence by switching between languages in the middle. Although Zeos did note that whatever the other language was, it was written in Dwarvish script. Gar added that he had been reading a lot of the connection and opposition between the Prime Elementals and Creation's song, and wondered if the other language was primordial, however it is still unconfirmed. The group ate breakfast and decided to purchase a carriage for their journey to the Cloud Spires. As the group was leaving the tavern, Mavis gave Gar a strange device that he crafted the night before, a stone with a vague image of Mavis's face carved into it. The stone was wrapped in copper wire with a red button on its side and a funnel-like object attached to the mouth of the carved face. Mavis explained that the item only worked once a day, but that it will emulate whatever Gar did the other day. What Mavis did not realize was the sending spell. May, Zeos, and Laren made their way to the stables on the southeast end of town. After Zeos calculated the time and distance they would need the carriage for, Zeos paid the 20 gold for the rental plus a 5 gold security deposit. May asked if there was a map available, but the stable worker told her that she'd have to get that from a general goods store in town, which she proceeded to do. Zeos asked if there were any notable towns on the road east, and the main one that the worker could think of was a town called Teu, which he described as a small, simple town, but somewhere that they could get supplies. Eventually, the rest of the group arrived at the stables and proceeded to depart on the journey to the Cloud Spires. The group traveled for approximately 8 hours before stopping for the evening and setting up camp in the midst of a small gathering of trees a bit off the dirt road they had been following. While discussing the possible wildlife in the area, Mavis asked May what it was like further north, as all Mavis had ever known was his home in Sunset Valley. The group discussed much of the land of Ador that they have heard of so far, when May mentioned Nidon, the city of coin, as it was where her father was from, and where she lived for a while once her parents had passed. Gar remembered that the merchant at A Pocket in Time had mentioned that Nidon was the city where a vendor was said to have traveled to after purchasing the pocket watch that May was looking for. May stated that she would search the thriving metropolis of Nidon from top to bottom if she had to find it. During Gar's watch, he sat in the soft grass looking up at the stars as his mind began to connect stars into shapes of waves, shapes of small distant islands, bringing back memories of Gar's time with his crew. In this moment, Gar realized that he's finally started the process of moving on from the pain of his past, yet still feeling the grip on his past, not wanting to fully let go. Before Gar's watch ended, he began to craft a dastardly plan, one that involved him stuffing a bunch of grass into his bedroll as he rushed over to Laren and May, claiming that he could not wake up whoever it was, and his magic was not working. As the two of them rushed over to the bedroll to figure out what was wrong, all of the grass fell out, and Gar quickly walked away, leaving May and Laren with a sigh of both relief and disappointment that they fell for such mischief. Finally, Zeus took his watch and spent most of his time reading the Sylvan language book that he had rented from the library. As the group awoke the next morning, they quickly packed up camp, ate some rations, and continued along the dirt road they had been following. After a few hours of travel, the group noticed an overturned carriage on the path. May stopped the party's carriage about 100 feet away and everyone disembarked, and pretty quickly noticed the blood on the ground, the wheel tracks leading to the broken carriage, and the dead bodies that laid scattered on the ground. Those of the group from Sunset Valley recalled the time they were ambushed by goblins using a broken carriage as bait on the road to Stoneworth, and so proceeded with caution. Before approaching the cart, May handed a platinum ring to Zeus to be able to cast Warding Bond on him if it was needed. Upon approaching the carriage, the party was able to identify 4 dead commoners and 3 dead bandits. Laren checked the bandits for any symbols of the Knox family, but was unable to find any. Everyone seemed to have died from some very powerful blunt force to their bodies, and Gar was able to spot some large, deep humanoid footprints in the ground, recalling that they looked very similar to footprints that Gork the Cyclops would have made, but even larger, as though Gork was only an adolescent. As Gar pointed this out, suddenly the massive, looming, silhouetted figure of a Cyclops appeared standing over the group from a small 10-foot cliff next to the road, letting out a loud roar at the group and brandishing a massive great club aggressively toward them. Very quickly, the group realized that this Cyclops packed quite a punch, nearly knocking May unconscious immediately, but the group banded together and assaulted the Cyclops with a barrage of attacks, quickly turning the tide of battle. When it looked as though the group had the upper hand, a second Cyclops appeared from the opposite direction, holding a massive boulder that he launched through the air toward Laren, narrowly missing her. Amidst the frenzy of flames from Mavis, the flurry of spells from Zeus, Laren's precise arrows, and May and Gar holding the front lines wielding divine magic, the group dispatched the first Cyclops, which caused the second one to enter a blind rage towards the group, as all of its attention suddenly focused on Gar, the one that struck the final blow against the other Cyclops. The group focused all of its power on this final Cyclops, Zeus even unleashing a massive fireball against it, but in Cyclops' rage, it managed to knock Gar unconscious, very clearly not going to relent, preparing to go in for the kill. May rushed over to Gar, preparing a healing spell to restore him to consciousness, when all of a sudden Mavis noticed May stop just as she reached Gar's body. She slowly turned her attention to the Cyclops, dropped her shield to the ground, and wielded her flail with both hands, attempting to bring the Cyclops down once and for all. Just as the Cyclops nearly reached Gar, Zeus unleashed a final chromatic acid orb that pierced through the skull of the Cyclops, causing it to fall dead. Mavis rushed to Gar's body in just enough time to heal him back to consciousness, as Gar nearly died from bleeding out. As Gar's eyes slowly opened, seeing Mavis's figure standing over him, Gar reached out and simply pulled Mavis in for a hug. As the group recovered from battle, May and Laren began digging graves for the dead commoners and for the bandits. Mavis, Gar, and Zeus investigated the broken carriage, and Mavis managed to find a small box filled with gold and a ring lying on top of the gold. Once all the dead had been buried, May said a prayer over each of the graves and tied a bit of red string around the makeshift gravestones. The party took a moment to breathe, before continuing on their journey towards the Cloud Spires, to hopefully, finally, get some answers to the questions surrounding this memoriam that they hold.